Hello again, friends, and welcome back. Who is the greatest guru of all time? It's a question I've been, pondering in the back of my noggin for the past 30 years or so. I think I got into philosophy and the occult and spirituality when I was a teenager, somewhere around 15 or so. So it's been a little while, let's just say. And as I sit here and sip the very last of my fancy little latte that I made, I thought I would just briefly discuss who I think is the greatest guru of all times, and why. And it's probably not what you think. So I've made a lot of videos over the years about different philosophers, speakers, just people who have influenced me in my life. But it's been quite a while since I talked about any of them. And there's a reason for that. Because with all the topics that I discuss on my channel, the most important aspect of my thought process is the spiritual aspect. The connection to the ether, the connection to this cosmic consciousness and awareness that we all share. And it's ineffable. It's very zen. When you try to put it into words, it just doesn't come out right. And I can't tell you how many dozens of times I've tried to sit down and make a video and explain some of these things and fallen short on finding the right words to actually explain how I feel about this topic or what I want to express. I already feel myself stumbling over my words here. I'm going to say, as a psychonaut, which I consider myself, I want to make it clear that that doesn't just mean a person who is always experimenting with psychedelics. It's more than that, much more than that. It's, an exploring of the mind, of the personal place that we have in this world, and learning to accommodate ourselves and others and live in this three-dimensional reality that we inhabit, while at the same time making room for something greater that we can't understand. And I wasn't raised religious, but in my teen years I did read Revelation from the Bible and found it fascinating because I was curious about, the apocalypse aspect of it. And for many years since then, when I was 14 or 15, I got a hold of a bottle of India ink and went and tattooed on my leg a bunch of symbols. And one is the monad, one is the symbol for the earth. There's the chicken and the egg becoming one. All of these things, and this spiritual cross and a yin yang, all these things that I'd learned about, but never really understood because I was 14, 15, right? Until I got older, how these things would influence my life and how the choices I've made through my life have not been random, and how everything that I ever needed to know has always been known by me. It's just a matter of remembering. So this is my preamble to the guru discussion, which the best gurus on earth don't tell you anything that you don't already know. They don't put words in your mouth. They don't put gods in your mind. They don't tell you what to believe. They allow you to trust yourself to believe in something greater that you already know exists. And I'm not talking about some biblical God or force that has a personal vested interest in your life, and perhaps that's the case. I don't know. That's one of the beautiful things about it. Nobody knows. This is something that has taken me a long time to be confident enough to say with a surety that nobody knows God. And this is why, when I was a teenager, for example, I remember thinking, God, it'll be interesting to be an adult and, learn about these things that only adults know, or, kind of figure life out. And then you find out when you become an adult, you look around and you say, God, these guys don't know shit. Half the things I was taught were bullshit. It's the same way when you're an adult and you say, well, one day I'll be wise enough to know what the gurus know. And you continue to evolve and evolve and evolve, and you think you're just on the precipice of some great discovery. Maybe you have this Satori experience, which is like a kind of an awakening or a realization in Buddhism. And I want to make it clear here that I'm not going to be using that type of terminology in my discussion, like Satori, but it was the best description I had. I suppose I could have used epiphany, because in my personal approach to spiritual truth, if you will, I've realized that everyone wants to categorize everything into, and it's okay to make things into symbols and ideas. But it's quite a different thing to try to categorize everything as this is the name for this feeling and this idea, and this is what it means. It's so subjective and so ridiculous that you find when you're seeking through these channels, you find Zen ends up being the closest to the truth that one can find. Because a Zen master does not teach his students anything. He says, come back when you're ready. The student comes back. There's so many stories about, the student cutting his own arm off to prove that his dedication to the Zen master, and then within a month realizing that he has nothing to teach, because the whole idea is to open you up to teaching yourself. And that's what we're here to do. We are, without getting into, epistemology and the depth of the human psyche and where we come from and our history, all we know is that stuff comes together. Okay? It's called emergence, would be the scientific term for things that emerge out of the chaos. The way that atoms come together to form molecules, then those molecules form proteins, those proteins form tissue, forming various organs in the body. It's an unbelievable machine that we wield here. So being in this meat sack, we tend to most often identify with the body because that's where we are. This is our reality. You feel your hands, your hair, clothing, the air around you. But once in a while, you get far enough out in your own mind to where you realize the body is not where the soul resides. The body is not where, it's nothing more than a vessel, if you will, for this thing we call consciousness. And why this vessel evolved is beyond anyone's comprehension. But if you've ever gone very deep into the psyche and you've had this dualistic awareness, I guess, when you go back to source, it's an expression of itself, trying to express itself. It's all about polarities, and I'm trying to do this with simple language, because that's one of the biggest things that I have an issue with, is people who overcomplicate these issues by, writing entire books or making video essays talking about, well, you need to understand the dharmic connection to this and this and this, and it just turns people off because people don't want to learn what every single word means. But people don't feel comfortable putting it in Western terms, which leads me to why Alan Watts, to answer the title, I believe still to this day is the greatest guru to ever. Let me just reformulate that. Alan Watts, I believe, is the greatest guru for the Western mind, not for the world. If you're, from somewhere in Asia, you might have a different outlook on life. You might have a different guru that would be better suited for you. If you are in the Middle East, you might have a different guru that is better suited to you. Alan Watts went over, he did many years of study on comparative religion and trying to understand the psyche and the mystical experience. This was long before he took psychedelics. So I know a lot of people think back in the 60s, all these guys just took a bunch of drugs and then everybody just had all these crazy experiences and just acted like they were gurus. That's not the case. Even Timothy Leary was a professor at, just like Ram Dass. Well, Richard Alpert. And if you're not familiar with the names, that's okay. I know some of you are and some of you aren't. I was listening to a podcast the other day about dropping out and about society, and it was the houseboat. You can, if you go on your podcast platform, you can find it. It's the houseboat discussion, something like that, from Alan Watts, Allen Ginsberg, Alan Cohen, Timothy Leary, and Ram Dass, aka Richard Alpert. Timothy Leary and Ram Dass were both professors who went, once they discovered psychedelics, they kind of were forced out of their professions or left their professions on their own volition to go and pursue this kind of cosmic connection through psychedelics with people. And I understand the mentality they had at the time and the reason why they did it, because these substances are mind manifesting to the extreme, to the point where if people can't wake up quick enough, the fear is that this planet is just going to fall into chaos and we're just going to destroy ourselves. So maybe there's a tool that we've evolved along with that can help wake people up to their own selves, their own reality. And this is why there was a huge movement with psychedelic mushrooms, which came actually after the LSD experiences. Although there was Wassman, I think it was Wassman that went down to... it was Hoffman that invented LSD, and I think it was Wasserman or Wassman. Can't remember the name of the guy, but he went to Mexico and he brought back some of the original, cubensis mushrooms, and then people started growing them. These psychedelics have been with us from the beginning. Mescaline, ayahuasca. They're all the same thing. Now, they're all different in their own way. LSD, ayahuasca, mushrooms, even, ketamine and LSD. But they all trick the brain into a state of not being so wrapped up in the frontal cortex, which allows us to function in this world, to be able to be focused, to be able to react if a ball is thrown at us, to be able to snap back and say something. We have our language centers and everything in our brain that are operating on a certain level. You can take substances or go through certain procedures or let's just say practices to, whether it's breathing techniques, meditation, yoga, whatever it might be, that brings you to the level where you've shut down the part of your brain that you don't need, your default mode network, if you will, and reverted back to kind of that primal self. And if you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, then I have no way of explaining it. But there's a core part of our spirit that can be, experienced, where it's like you're often under, it could be when you're under the influence of a disassociative, which often when you're very far, far into that realm, you hit this sweet spot where you still remember who you are and you still know you exist and where you are, but that you're completely oblivious to the world around you. This is kind of a very sought after state because it's what I consider to be the purest state. So to go back to Alan Watts, the reason why I consider him the greatest guru for the West is because he put everything in layman terms. He made everything simple to understand for people. And I discovered him decades ago, but I've continually re-listened to many of his discussions. Now, over the years, I've listened to many other, East, West, North and South philosophers and speakers, gurus. Many of them have influenced me greatly. Ram Dass is a phenomenal guy. All of them. But this particular houseboat discussion they had, they were confronting Timothy Leary on his on one part of the discussion about his idea of, tune in, turn on, drop out. And they were kind of calling him out on it. I don't recall who it was, but saying, well, you can't just drop out. He said, you're still on the circuit. You're still writing books. You're still out here speaking with us. Therefore, you're part of the system, right? You come to the realization that a full awareness of who we are has nothing to do with leaving society. It has nothing to do with dropping out of existence as a human. It has everything to do with moving into existence as a community and understanding that, but not buying into society's bullshit. I feel like I stand alone a lot of the time on certain issues. Like, I see commercialization and money thrown around all around me. People thinking that buying a new boat, a better car, or diamond ring is going to make them happy. And to me, it's just absurd. I don't understand it. But if people think it makes them happy, then they will continue to do it. And if they get that little dopamine rush when they do so, even though I hate reducing it down to brain chemistry because it's much more than that, we program ourselves constantly to live in these ways. And when you start looking out at the world's quote gurus, we could go from the 60s hippie gurus all the way up to the modern day Andrew Tates, right? The guys who are out there, the Jordan Petersons, right? That a lot of people flock to for advice on life. Who, to a guy like me, I see, say, for example, Jordan Peterson as like a one-trick pony from the very beginning. I'm well aware of his story. I've listened to most of his, many of his lectures and discussions, not always because I want to hear what he has to say, but because I feel like I need to. And I'm curious to know how people operate in this new world. In other words, there was a time when you might record yourself, such as the houseboat discussion in 1967, where I remember Mark Watts, Alan's son, said, why would he was saying his dad would ask, why would anybody want to listen to these recordings in the future? As if it's pointless to record them. It's like, oh, there's cars honking in the background and noise in the microphone and people breathing. They're priceless today, having them. But you move forward into 2024, every single thing that is done in this world is recorded 24 hours a day. And therefore, there's an unlimited amount of information, much of it garbage out there, that is posing as information. And I think one of the most crucial things that we can do for ourselves is to remember that being informed does not make us happier or better people. It depends on what we inform ourselves on. So being aware of everything going on in the world, being aware of, or having a specific expertise in a field, none of that means that you're better off than anyone else. Because all of us have our own place and our own piece of this puzzle that fit together. There have been times when I've almost got it. It's like the cat toy that jumps into the screen and you go to grab it and it's gone. It's just in and out, in and out. You have it for a minute and it's just gone. And this has been my life for the past several decades. Almost understanding something and then realizing and pondering it. This is where revisiting books is important. You will read a book that you read 20 years ago and find a completely different book is there. Even though it's the exact same words, the exact same story. And the thing is, we often miss what we don't understand. There's an old biblical term for it, those with the eyes to see or those with ears to hear. Most of us have heard these slogans thrown around, and it almost comes across as a little bit arrogant when people say that. Oh, those with ears to hear. But it's true. Same with the eyes to see. When I look at the old occult symbolism and Freemasonry symbolism, I understand it so much more than I did back when I was younger. when I see, this dichotomy expressed through the sun and the moon, through, different numbers of rays on a sun sitting by a, I can't even get into the terms, but because it's pointless. That's when I pull myself out, when I stop talking about these things, because I just say, well, these interpretations have to be discovered by an individual. They can't be explained. There are peaks and there are valleys. If there weren't any peaks, there could not be valleys. If there were no valleys, there could not be peaks. We hear about this, this dualism between, everything seems to have an extreme, these polarities where almost every extreme thing in life has an opposite. But it's not bad. It's not, quote, positive or negative. That's the misunderstanding people have. One cannot exist without the other. And this is in the same way why we can't have a life of complete happiness. It doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. You cannot remain happy your whole life. You wouldn't know what happiness was, because happiness is based on knowing what it's like to not be happy. Just like depression. If everybody was sad all the time, we wouldn't even know what depression was. We'd just say, this is life. So we take it upon ourselves to try to discover who we are. And if we work hard enough, we find out that we are right exactly where we were when we started. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't look. It doesn't mean we shouldn't make the effort. Now, if you've gone through all these experiences and you still come back to a specific conclusion that this is fact, this is truth, this book, this religious text, whatever it might be, that's totally fine. That's your subjective experience and how you feel about things. And often, some people, a lot of people, really need actual physical ideas to manifest on and to, chant specific mantras, specific jewelry, beads, garb, whatever it might be, robes. Fine. That's all fine. Because it's a reminder of that connection with the unknown. But it's very dangerous when people start to assume it's the only way. You see, we're tribal by nature as humans. We can't help it. And the idea that we're trying to kind of assimilate everyone into this giant group where nobody notices the differences between anybody is ludicrous. It's impossible, and it's pointless, and it actually works against us as humans. There are plenty of people out there who are biased one way or another. But bias does not equal hatred, and bias does not always equal negativity. Bias, just like judgment, is an understanding and feeling a certain way or seeing things a certain way. When people say, don't judge people, say that's how we survive. You always judge people. If a guy has a knife and he's coming at you, you're judging him by the fact that he's carrying a knife and he's coming at you and he has that look in his eye like he's going to stab you. Of course you're going to fucking get out of the way. You're not going to say, well, I shouldn't judge. But we can get ourselves into trouble when we make assumptions. And making assumptions is what religion often does. It makes assumptions about what God wants, what is truth, and what really matters. We forget the things that we've learned. And that's why, as I said, we revisit these books. We need to relearn things. And that's why the guru can teach us these things, retell us things that we already know. When I say this stuff, it makes me feel foolish, like people already know this. But I find myself watching videos where I already know the answer, or of people that I've already heard, or stories I've already heard. Why? Because I need to revisit this. I need to remind myself, not just that, but reaffirm that other people feel the same way, and that I'm not alone. Because there are a lot of people out there who understand this, and I want to make this very clear. Most of the people who achieve a certain state of understanding about the unknowable nature of God and the ether and life don't go out and try to prove it to anybody else. In fact, a lot of folks tend to withdraw from talking about these topics because of the dogma that is involved in so many discussions. And this is very unfortunate because it's replaced by people who tell you they do have the answers. So you see all these guys out there screaming and all these preachers telling you they know what's true, and nobody countering them, because it's almost like an eye roll, like, let the world do what it does. But many people are calling people out by saying, well, you don't know for sure what you think you know. You don't know what happens in the afterlife, if there is one. You don't know if there's a hell. You don't know if. But the things I've seen, I'm convinced that there is something greater than us that we are a part of. It's this indescribable tapestry and connection of everything in the universe that I didn't understand when I was younger, but now I actually truly understand when people say there has to be God, not a God, but God. Everything is God. It's awareness. This whole universe is a mind. It's not a guy in the clouds with a beard. It's a total misconception, and most Christians don't even believe that. It's definitely not a white guy in the clouds with a beard, but who knows? Might be. People are just silly. And, we're all silly. And when you hear things about, especially within alchemy, about calcification, terms like fermentation, and the processes that go through of turning lead to gold, once you understand the metaphors, you realize the biggest takeaway from all of that is that we need to process the information over a long period of time before we can really understand it. We have to apply something to our lives. It's kind of like you can go to school to be a carpenter. You can learn all about the trades, but until you actually apply that in the real world, you don't know how well it's going to work out. And so you might find some of the tools you don't need, right? You might find that certain projects you don't want to do. You'll find your niche only through experiencing it and trying it. And growth stages that we go through are a process. And we can also choose not to go to school. See, every single day is a school. Every single day is a new lesson. And if we don't take that lesson, then we're not learning. Basically, a lot of people drop out of school once they're out of high school or college. And they say, this is what I know, this is what I've learned, this is what I'm going to do. And that's fine if that works for them. But understanding how important it is to let these ideas process in the back of our minds and then to revisit them later and question what we thought we knew was true every year, every decade. Crucial things. Because the riddle of life is, you can call it Brahman, or you can talk about the world soul or anima mundi. This idea that everything is conscious, that we're all part of this giant web, to me just seems so obvious. But to many people, they just can't fathom it. They can't understand it. And the more I step back from living, because when I was younger, I was like everybody else. I'm just living my life, doing my thing, trying to get a job, trying to move forward. And then I get to adulthood and I meet my wife and, she has a son, and then I have 2 more kids, and I'm going through all the life stuff. Meanwhile, trying to educate myself along the way as much as I can about these topics, knowing that one day, or hoping that one day at least, I can start to understand it a little better. And I feel like I finally grasped what I needed to grasp. It's just not maybe what people want to hear, that there is no true answer. It's almost as if it's a cop-out for some people, because they say, well, there has to be a truth somewhere. There is, but it's felt in the heart, and it's not expressible in words. It's a truth that that you can only give a wink and a nod about. You can never explain to people. But the people, when you sit around even in a group with like Watts and Ginsburg and all those guys, they even had a hard time expressing it to each other. Even sitting in a comfortable setting, and who knows what psychedelics they'd taken or not. But it doesn't matter. The psychedelics are only a tool that move people in that direction. Once you've experienced that, you don't need that to get there. The doors of perception are opened, and if you enter and you choose to look deeper, you might find some wild stuff in there. You definitely will. But you might find one day that you become this the estimated prophet, the one who thinks that he is God, the one who runs out screaming on the shore, I know all the truth. I know what's real. And watch out for those guys. Watch out for anybody who's trying to sell you something, especially. Because anybody who's trying to profit off of you by selling you their course on truth and spirit, they're all liars. Every single one of them. And I'm not saying that they're all purposefully lying to you. It's just that if you want to give people advice on how to live and achieve certain states of awareness, that's fine. But if you want to tell them what God is and what the afterlife is, you're lying. You're full of shit. You're wrong. And you don't know what you're talking about. And after listening to so many different people and having my own experiences, I might change my mind one day. Maybe I'll have an experience that will definitely confirm that I am absolutely wrong. But I'm convinced that no human is able to obtain that type of knowledge because our minds are not designed to handle it. And I hate to say it, but much of this is in, religious texts like the Bible. They talk about not being able to actually ever see God. It's just a metaphor for never being able to understand the bigger picture. It's not about a guy in the clouds. It's about the clouds. And the guy. Or the gal. A lot of folks want to complicate these things. And as I said back at the beginning, they want to give you a lot of really complicated terminology, and I urge people to explore all these things. I urge people to explore Christian mysticism, Islam, why we use, Arabic numerals instead of Roman numerals, why we chose certain letters in the alphabet, where, the root of words or etymology, where these things come from, and to explore everything. Because words, there's a reason why they call writing a word spelling. It's like casting a spell. Words have power because they come from the voice or the pen. But the voice is what we have to express ourselves. It is so important to be able to voice your concerns and voice how you feel about things. And I urge people to do so. Never hold back. You might not get the answer or the reply you want, but you'll get the one you need. I don't know how much you believe in synchronicities. I don't know if any of you have studied any of the things I'm talking about. I know that my audience is very wide and variable, but I think that every single one of you could benefit from learning about some of these things, at least. And don't be afraid. If you're already religious, that's fine. It doesn't mean you're going against your belief system to learn new things, because that's one of the final things I want to add, is that if you do have a belief system and it prevents you from seeking knowledge elsewhere, or other things are deemed to be good or bad or evil as far as information or knowledge, you've missed the plot and you're being lied to once again. There is nothing that is off limits. Nothing. I'm not saying people shouldn't do horrible. People should. I'm not saying doing horrible things is acceptable. I'm not saying harming other people. I'm saying anything you want to learn about, to study, should be your right, regardless of what your belief system is. Because there's no way to know if you're right until you know if you're wrong. And you can't know you're wrong until you've done your studies. And it's a lifelong endeavor. It'll never be complete. But there may be a point in your life where you come to the same conclusion that I have, that many of these things are unknowable. But in order to know that for sure, you have to try to know things. If that makes sense. You have to push yourself forward to learn as much as you can in order to realize all that learning was pointless. If that makes sense. Can't tell you how many books I've read on, podcasts or, video essays or whatever. I'm always obsessed with listening to people talk about spiritual encounters, everything from ghosts and Bigfoot and aliens to, afterlives and near-death experiences and remote viewing and all this. There's definitely something to all of it. In fact, my group text with my brother and a couple of my friends we have going for like a year, probably the longest group text we've ever had, or I've ever had with anybody. all kinds of weird shit in there. But we're talking about a little bit about the stars, and one of my buddies said Mercury's in retrograde, and I was like, he's like, even, everyone in the group is basically like, yeah, there's something to it, we just don't understand it. And I love that. I love the fact that